Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, March 22nd, 2007. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. With this week, part one of our two-part series on sanitization. This week, Murl Landman from National Chemicals joins us to give us his take on sanitization in general and to talk about Iodophor specifically. Well, if you're new to home brewing or would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. I had a great time in Austin at the South by Southwest Interactive Conference. The first night, my web designing buddy Kelly Dodson and I got to hang out with Chris Colby from Brew Your Own magazine and his beer-savvy wife, Jennifer. And also Charles Culp from Austin Homebrewing Supply was there, or Austin Homebrew Supply. And then the next night, we got to drop in a few minutes at the meeting of the Austin Zealots Homebrew Club and saw Chris and Jennifer and Charles there again and met some other good folks and sipped a couple of good homebrews. So that was fun. So I also want to say hi to everybody we met down there. Including those of you who just recognized me from the video podcast and came up and said hello. It's always a fun and appreciated surprise when that happens. And I think it kind of freaked out Chris Colby a little bit when that happened at the bar. He probably doesn't get recognized since he's, the magazine guy. You never see him. We don't know what Chris looks like. I'm still catching up from email from that trip, by the way. And I appreciate everybody writing in. I want to share one inspiring email. This is from Tracy, who lives near Tulsa. We've been talking a bit about managing our health lately on the podcast and enjoying our hobby and our beer at the same time. And I think Tracy's got a great story to tell. He says, I wanted to tell you that your shows have helped me get healthier. Yes, that's right, Tracy says. He says, I've always been a fan of great beers and have been brewing for about 2 years. Last summer, my doctor told me that my blood sugar was way too high and that I was on the verge of type 2 diabetes. I needed to lose about 70 pounds and began eating right and exercising. My first thought was my beer consumption would have to be extremely curtailed, if not stopped altogether. I began a high-protein diet and daily exercise plan. My doctor said I could keep brewing as long as I enjoyed the fruits of my labor in moderation. Tracy says instead of going out every day at lunchtime from my workplace, for the past 8 months I've been walking for 45 minutes on my lunch hour. One of the things that keeps me going is the great brewing podcasts that are out there for me to download and listen to during my exercise sessions. I have lost, to date, 50 pounds, and my blood sugar is way down and under control. That's great. I think that's outstanding. Tracy says, I still drink beer every day, and I still brew about 1 to 2 5-gallon batches per month. I do not eat bread or potatoes or any other starches. I save my carbs for my beer consumption. The doctor says that the main reason for my improvement is the daily exercise, and listening to the archives from your shows while I'm walking is a great break during the day, one that I look forward to. Tracy says, I know there are a lot of men out there our age, 35 to 50 years old, who could be in my same situation with their impending health issues. I want them to know that if they practice moderation in their eating habits, stay away from high carbs in foods, exercise regularly, they can be healthier and not have to give up their love for beer or the hobby of brewing. Well, that's great. Amazing. Congratulations to Tracy for making a positive move to take control of his health, and we're glad that Tracy's taking us along on his trek to better health. See there? Listening to the show is good for you. It's good for your health. Of course, you have to do something along with listening to the show. You can't just listen to the show. You have to, that's the catch. I told Tracy, by the way, to let me know that when he's hit his target weight, I will help him start his new slimmer wardrobe off with a free Basic Brewing T-shirt. So keep up the good work, Tracy, and look forward to hearing from you when you hit your target weight. That's outstanding. Like I say, I'm still catching up on email. Got a lot in the inbox, and I've responded to a lot of it. I've gotten a lot of good amount of response on the topic of brewing software programs that you're using out there, so I appreciate that especially. And surprisingly, I've not got a lot of response on the batch sparging versus fly sparging issue. But maybe that's a topic that's gotten enough mileage out there on forums and homebrew club meetings and such as that already. So I'm going to read an email on both of those topics in a few weeks, so there's still time to send in your comments if you like. You can send in your thoughts to james@basicbrewing.com or just use the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. By the way, the latest episode of Basic Brewing Video is out there. Steve and I planned on doing a show on Party Guile brewing, brewing 2 beers from one batch of grain, from one mash. But the weather's kind of nasty this week here, so we decided to stay inside and to taste how our latest mead experiment is coming. We tried 5 different yeasts in the same must to see what they would do, and you can check that out on basicbrewing.com too. Now, for the first in our 2-part series on sanitization. Next week we'll talk to Charlie Talley, the inventor of Star San. But this week we talk to Murl Landman of National Chemicals about sanitization in general and specifically about iodophor. Well, Murl Landman, welcome to Basic Brewing Radio.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And you work for National Chemicals, and is it a family business?
Yes, it is a family business. The business was initially Cook Chemical, purchased by my grandfather in 1947, and then it was reincorporated and has been in my family for the last 3 generations.
So you get to work for the family, which is cool. And we want to talk to you about sanitization in general and about iodophor specifically. And you manufacture the BTF brand of iodophor.
That is correct.
And tell us about iodophor basically. What is it?
Well, iodophor is an iodine complex that's designed to deliver what's called titratable iodine into an environment to kill biological agents, microbiological agents, bacteria, latent yeast, products like that.
And how does it work?
Well, it works primarily by destroying. It primarily lyses the cells of these products or of these biological compounds, and it's a highly concentrated product. You need very little of it, and it's one of these products that it's been around and it's been known for its biological efficacy for quite a long time. It's been used in the dairy industry for the better part of 60 or 70 years. And
you were saying before we got started that just a little bit of the iodophor solution can do the job.
That's true. It's one of the lowest required concentrations in the food service sanitizing market. It requires 12.5 parts per million, which, as I said before, is like being one person packed in Giant Stadium, and that's 1 out of 80,000 that's all it takes to meet those minimum sanitizing levels.
That's one powerful guy.
Yes, indeed.
First of all, let's talk generally first.
Mm-hmm.
When you're sanitizing for home brewing, what are the important keys just to get started?
Well, the first thing that you need to deal with, sanitizing is a crucial step to the whole equation, but there are 3 steps to properly sanitize, to reach a properly end sanitized product. And you need to have, the first step is to wash, the second step is rinse, and then the final step is sanitize. Because you can use all the iodophor sanitizer in the world on a soil-laden vessel, but if you don't penetrate through those soils and remove them, you're only going to sanitize the surface. You'll never get down into the rest of the soils. Sanitizers are designed to work on hard surfaces, things like glass and metals, in order to make sure that the surface is free of biologically active products. But if you have an abundant food source for these biologically active products to exist on, If you never get rid of that, you can keep sanitizing, and they'll still appear just from their existence in the air.
So it's important to clean before you sanitize.
Exactly.
And to
the
rinse.
principles of cleaning are very important to remove that initial soil load. Any remaining yeast buildup. Yeast buildup is always something that's a bit of a transgressor, because it likes to stick on the inside wall, of a vessel, and that's why an alkaline cleaner is usually used to drop those food sources for the biological products to grow on.
And one of my practices that I think helps me out a lot is, as soon as I'm finished using a piece of equipment like a vinyl hose or something like that, I rinse it out immediately, so that there's the sticky stuff doesn't have a chance to set up inside there, because once you say get some wort dried inside a hose or something like that, it's going to be really hard to get that stuff out.
And a lot of times the time that it takes to clean it immediately afterwards versus the time it takes to clean it after letting a soil settle, you might as well throw it away and start over.
Yeah.
It's the aspects of cleaning that you need to get into then at that point make it extremely difficult, especially if you start dealing with hoses where cleaning the ends of the hose isn't the problem. It's getting the stuff in the middle that proves to be difficult over time.
And we say that Iodophor is a no-rinse sanitizer, but in a way it's kind of a misnomer, because if you're washing something, that second step that you mentioned is rinsing, and it's important to get the cleaning chemicals off of the surface before you sanitize.
Correct. And Iodophor really is the last treatment it's the final step in the chain. And you washing with some sort of alkaline cleaner. We manufacture a number of powders and liquid products under the BLC and PLC markets, or brand names, I should say. And those are specifically designed for dropping soil load, for taking out that little bit of latent wort that's in the system. And they do that with a higher pH, because most food products, and beer is really no different, most food products are acidic. So when you use an alkaline cleaner, that helps to dissolve and react and remove that and loosen that soil. And then the surfacting agents, which are like the soaps and the other additives that go into there, keep that soil in suspension to be rinsed out and pushed away, and also to rinse out the cleaner. At that point, you're now back to a clean slate. You have now you're just dealing with the hardware and any sort of microbiologicals that would be on the surface. And this is where the sanitizer comes in. So the sanitizer comes in, and then it washes away all those microbiologicals. It kills them. And after you sanitize and allow to kind of drip dry a little bit, you're ready to go.
Now, maybe you can explain, we've tried to explain it on the show a few times, the difference between sanitizing and sterilizing.
There's a huge difference. And there are actually three terms that are commonly used, commonly interchanged, and really should never be. And where it becomes difficult is into the government regulation of them. The EPA regulates terms like sanitize, disinfect, and sterilize in the market. So that means if someone makes a claim of sanitizing or disinfecting or sterilizing on any sort of product, technically you have to go through and meet standards set forth by the federal government and by your local government. In the United States, that's a state, so you have to meet the guidelines by your state and your federal government to use those terms. To sanitize means that you've killed a certain percentage of the biologicals, and that usually comes down to like 99.9%. On disinfecting, you're looking at 99.99%. And at sterilizing, you've killed 100%. And usually to properly sterilize equipment, you need to run them through an autoclave, which takes pressure and temperature far beyond anything that our current spectrum and knowledge of living creatures can endure.
So
or at least that can endure in our environment. And sterilizing is usually reserved, and the expense of sterilizing is reserved for laboratory equipment, scientific equipment, surgical equipment, and most often than not, those objects, once they've been sterilized, are packaged in a sterile environment into a sterile container and contained that way, and usually used very quickly afterwards to prevent a breach in the container that would then compromise it being sterilized.
So in the home brewing environment, really a pressure cooker is the equivalent of an autoclave in being able to actually sterilize the pieces of equipment, canning jars and things like that would be able to fit inside a pressure cooker, right?
Well, a pressure cooker doesn't quite get there.
Wow.
The pressure cooker can get to the disinfecting level. I mean, some commercial pressure cookers can. But an autoclave, I'm not sure if you've ever seen an autoclave device, and they run somewhere to the tune of anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000 for a desktop model. And this is something that you can fit, smaller items in. And usually they have cantilever secured sealed containment doors on them, and are built out of tremendous integrity because they're reaching unbelievable PSI levels. So the pressure levels that go into autoclaving are definitely far beyond anything that you would reach on a canning level. The integrity of a canner will be destroyed. I mean, if you got to those levels, your canning container would literally explode on your countertop. If your canning operation is working correctly, your check valve goes off and releases the steam.
Mm-hmm.
However, that brings us to an interesting point of sanitizing with steam, because in order to sanitize with steam, you do need to use a pressure cooker. And that's something that I've found, too. A lot of discussions that I've had with individual home brewing enthusiasts that have placed the argument for steam, being that it's a safer option and that there's no chemicals involved and there's no risk of any. It's the holistic way of doing it. This is how the Egyptians brewed. I've heard every single argument for it, which steam does work. It does work, but you need to have a pressure cooker. You can't just hold it over a steaming pot.
Mm.
And when it comes to safety implications of using steam, if you're holding a carboy or a vat or anything like that over a pressure cooker, I don't know if you've ever had the luxury of a steam burn, but you put that steam burn at upwards of 200 plus degrees. That now you're talking a second degree burn. If you mishandle the steam, so it definitely has its risks as well.
Now, what about this may be a little off topic, but what about using the dishwasher to sanitize bottles? I put a temperature probe in my dishwasher, and during the heated drying cycle, it got up to above 160 degrees for, I believe it was at least 15 minutes.
You should be fine with that. The thing that you need to be wary of, though, is that the sanitizing step on dishwashers also depends on the temperature of the water entering the dishwasher. Okay, certain assumptions are made on that. So what you did on putting a probe thermometer in there, that's for upwards of 15 minutes, you should be within the clear.
So what are the guidelines on that? And I know that there are different. If you're able to achieve a higher temperature, it's a shorter time, and a lower temperature, it's a longer time. Is there a sort of guideline that you can use?
There are. The tricky part where it gets into, once again, kind of comes back to the soil aspect. Because what we run into is that people come back and say, let's say you have an unfiltered beer, all right, and your bottles are full of yeast at the bottom. Well, okay, I'll just put those in my dishwasher, run it through the sanitizing cycle, fantastic.
Mm.
But if you haven't removed, your dishwasher isn't handled to remove that sort of soil load out of a bottle. So now you've effectively baked on soil load into your bottles. So to come back and say that, I mean, there's now if you've previously washed your bottles or whatever equipment and you're going to use your dishwasher as a sanitizer, so if they're clean going in, then you can definitely do that.
Yeah, I'm a nut when it comes to rinsing bottles. I immediately rinse the bottles after I decant the beer.
You have to be.
In the past, people have given me bottles. Hey, I'm returning your bottles, and there's like cigarettes in the bottom, and they caked on yeast and the mold that's grown up on that. And in the past, I haven't had enough bottles where I would spend a lot of time scrubbing those things out and using a bottle washer and a brush. Now, when I get those back, they go right into the recycling.
Yeah, and it's once again, your time is worth something.
Yeah.
When it comes to your equipment and your bottling, and bottling is like a draft beer service. It's the final step in making in your beer. You put all this time, all this effort, all this material into it. To put it into a dirty bottle or a dirty glass is just it's a travesty.
Yeah.
It's sort of like one of those situations where the final guy drops the ball after everybody's handled it so carefully. So it's a situation that definitely being adamant about sanitation is the cornerstone of delivering a good food service product. Mm-hmm. It helps you constrain those variables, and it's you can when something amazing or terrible happens to your brew, that it's the variables that you were playing with, not some latent wild strain of yeast that is somehow involved itself into your beer due to not properly removing it.
And kind of along those lines, and talking about variables, I'm the kind of nut that I measure. When I'm mixing up a batch of iodophor solution, I measure the amount of water and I measure the amount of iodophor that goes into the water. And I know that I don't know. I'm probably in the minority because I've been to brew sessions, group brew sessions where, in a full carboy of water, a couple of glugs of iodophor in there, and it gets that color of red that we all recognize, and yeah, it's good. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's a huge mistake, and coming from a chemical manufacturer, that might seem kind of counterproductive to my aims of selling more product. But iodophor is grossly overused, particularly in the homebrew market. To put it plainly, we package the popular package of our product in the homebrew market is a 4-ounce package. All right, and at 1/10 of an ounce per gallon of water, that should make 40 gallons of end-use dilution sanitizer. So that should last you. I mean, if you at the maximum make a gallon, which about 1/10 of an ounce is about as small of a amount you can measure with an iodophor to really accurately do it into a gallon of water. That 1 gallon of sanitizer, unless you're brewing on a pretty large scale, 1 gallon of sanitizer, end dilution sanitizer, is really all you should need. And the difficulty is because iodophor is so concentrated, and because in our case it only takes 1/10 of an ounce per gallon of water to reach that 12.5 parts per million. The issue is that you quickly enter the disinfecting level of 25 parts per million when you decide to free pour the product. So if you put 0.2 of an ounce in a gallon, you're now at a disinfecting level. And disinfecting levels need to be rinsed.
You think you're doing yourself more good by pouring more in there.
It's definitely, this is something we run across all the time. Well, if a little's good, a lot must be great. And that's not the case, particularly when you're dealing with sanitizers, because sanitizers have been tested and evaluated to meet certain criteria at certain levels. And when you start going over that, you begin to run into issues where, all of a sudden you have a considerable amount of iodophor left on the surface of your carboy, even after it's dried. And when you basically rehydrate the carboy, when you bring in your brewing water and all of that, all of the liquid for brewing, you now reactivate some of that iodophor to a point that it starts to kill off your yeast culture.
So you're sanitizing your wort.
Precisely. And what you end up now, more often than not, that won't be a problem, because if you've properly cultured your yeast, your yeast are multiplying, and there's so much food in your environment for the yeast to continue multiplying that you're not going to, you're not going to take out a huge portion of your yeast population. But it's still a variable that could have an impact, could have an effect on some of the details or some of the nuance you're looking to achieve, particularly on brewing time. That's something that it's all about constraining those variables. And if you measure every time and you use it properly every time, you don't ever have to sit back and worry, well, did I use too much? Did I use too little? Was it enough? Was it not enough? And being consistent is really important.
And if you use too much, it could be that you could reach the taste threshold and could give your beer an off flavor.
Normally, surprisingly enough, iodophor, you need to use a lot of iodophor to reach the taste level, especially when you're at that. If you're only at the 12.5 or even the 25 parts per million, there's really only a few compounds on the planet that reach down to levels that low where you can perceive and taste that product. And iodophor, for some people that are iodine sensitive, they don't necessarily taste it as much as they sense its presence. But these are also people that are hypersensitive to iodine content in food, salt, shellfish, things like that. So they're going to notice, and it's got a healthy measure. You're looking at a teaspoon in a pint of water, and those people can sense that.
Wow!
But that's a pretty slim portion of the population that has to deal with that.
So if you're measuring your iodophor properly, how much exposure do you have to give your, say if I always keep a sink full of iodophor solution in the kitchen when I'm brewing, so that if I forget to sanitize a spoon or something like that, I can just throw it in there.
Sure.
And my rule is 2 minutes. So what is the official rule?
Well, the official rule is 2 minutes. But the details of it, the dirt's always in the details, is that it's 2 minutes of wet time. All right? So as long as the surface is wet for 2 minutes, it can be drying during that time, but it doesn't necessarily mean 2 minutes of immersion time. So what's going on is on a microscopic level. So you don't need to just having the surface coated in the product for up to 2 minutes is like immersing it in an ocean. At a certain point, it doesn't matter anymore, because the products that are being interacted with are on the microscopic level. So just even what you and I look at as something as mildly wet is really an ocean of product to these compounds. When you look at it in relative terms.
So when I sanitize my carboys, what I do is I get a bit of I siphon a bit of iodophor solution, say half a gallon or something, through the tubing, my racking cane and my tubing from the sink into the carboy, so that I'm sanitizing the inside of the tubing as well. And then I pick up the carboy and I give it a shake, and for a minute or so, I'm sloshing that iodophor solution around in there, and then I turn it upside down and let it dry out. Is that good?
That's perfectly fine. But you could be doing less. Actually, you could be doing less work. You really need to just coat the inside of it. Just that half gallon is fine. Shake it a couple times. You don't need to shake it for 30 seconds. Shake it 2 or 3 times. Make sure you can visibly see when all the inside portions have been coated with the liquid. and you can just invert it right then.
Wow. So
or I know some people that use spray bottles.
Uh-huh.
You know, they use a spray bottle and they spray it in there, and they spray down their products with a good saturation. And you need to use a pretty quality spray bottle. You know, especially if they're sanitizing. You know, a lot of people when they're sanitizing, like some of the vats, the carboys are a little more difficult. I tend to believe that the partial fill and swirl method is the most effective on carboys, mostly because you're not going to spill it anywhere. You have a very small neck that you can top off and don't have to worry about spilling iodophor all over yourself.
And then is it essential that the equipment be completely dry before you use it?
Nope.
So I could slosh and
If after 2 minutes the surface is still wet, you can go right ahead. Because that small amount of moisture really only accounts for maybe half a teaspoon out of, you know, most carboys are anywhere in 3.5 to 5 gallon range. So half a teaspoon in 5 gallons, you won't even know it's there.
So I've probably been too careful in my and you know, and also I've run into people who sanitize with iodophor solution and then rinse.
Nope, you've just completely defeated the purpose of sanitizing. Because there's a reason that your water is boiled. You know, brewing water gets boiled before or using some sort of filtered water in the brewing process. Because if people really knew what was in the water that comes through our tap system, even in the stuff that's in the bottled waters, it would astound you. And there's enough biologicals in the rinse water that you could recontaminate your carboy, and you run the risk of it.
I also know
you should never rinse with water after sanitizing, and you should never towel dry, because God knows what's on that towel as well.
Yeah, you've dried the dog off with the towel.
Right, it can, you know, and that's why you know, even in bars and restaurants, you know, when you see somebody towel drying a glass, that's technically against health code. Because, you know, hey, if you watch them close enough, well, that's the same towel that somebody spilled a drink and I'm going to wipe the counter off with, and you know, that people's elbows and hands have been on. You know, and there's really no guarantee that some or all of those you know, bacteria or biologicals didn't transfer over to the glass that they just polished.
What about those who say, well, I'm going to boil up some rinse water? So they boil water for 15 minutes, and then they keep that around to rinse the iodophor off of their freshly sanitized gear.
Well, unless they're rinsing with boiling water, they're not really going to do much. To tell you the truth, they're going to have the same problem. Because just having that water boiled, I mean, there's bacteria, there's all sorts of products floating in the air. You know, there's all sorts of bacteria, microbiologicals that can have an impact. You know, wild yeasts, products like that. When you sanitize the inside of you know, your container, the whole idea is that you sanitize and then you introduce your brewing products. And if you aren't going to be brewing right away, you sanitize right before you brew, in order to remove all those variables, because what's in the air, what's in the dust, you know, especially when you consider that most dust is, you know, broken down skin particles. That's food for bacteria and other biological products, molds, spores, all sorts of things that are floating around in the air that you know, that can. It doesn't take much to wreak havoc on a good brew. So
what about you know, once I use a tube a few times and I've soaked it in iodophor solution, it starts to get discolored. Should I worry about that? You really don't have anything to worry about that. Part of that is due to the dense color of the iodophor. You know, iodophor and the concentrate will stain, and that's one of the drawbacks of iodophor, is that it easily stains, and there are negative color aspects, and the color will migrate over time. But my suggestion is that if you're using iodophor
at the proper level, the 12.5 parts per million, you're going to have to do a lot of sanitizing to start to discolor that product at the 12.5 parts per million. Now, if you've reached the 25 or 50 parts per million by not accurately measuring the product, then you're definitely going to start staining the product. And the same with the concentrate. If you put the concentrate against plastic, because most plastics do have some sort of migration capacity, meaning that if you submerge a product in the plastic for long enough, that plastic will begin to take in the characteristics, be it color, odor, of the product it contains. But plastics also get aggravated in alcohol environments because the plastic begins to become what's called case hardened as the alcohol begins to kind of leach and break down some of the elastins that exist in the tubing. And this is something that we see because we also deal with the professional line cleaning market. These are the industry players that go into on-premise accounts, bars and restaurants, and professionally clean beer lines, the service line from the keg to the faucet. And that's a long vinyl tube that's full of alcohol all day, and over a case of usually sometimes depending on the product, as little as 5 or 6 years, lines start to become case hardened.
Yeah, I've noticed a little bit on my vinyl tubing. After I've used it for a while, it does get less pliable.
Mm-hmm. And that's mostly due to the alcohol.
So people shouldn't worry too much about if they do get discoloration. If they do get discoloration, they may be using
too much of the iodophor.
I think what my problem is I get kind of lazy and I leave the tubing in the iodophor solution while I'm doing other things. And then bring it out when I'm ready to use it.
And especially if your product has started to become case hardened, the vinyl, that opens up micro fissures and all sorts of aspects in the line. And actually, when you start to see extensive loss of elasticity, it might be time to replace the vinyl tube because those micro fissures become, and that's something that we see a lot of. When you don't regularly and properly clean a product, particularly a beverage line, that's made out of the vinyl products, it's those fissures become. Think of it like sandpaper when you rub it over a piece of wood. All those wood particles hang up on those little bumps and crevices on the sandpaper, and that's kind of what's going on a microscopic level. Is that you're starting to create small fissures and valleys in the line surface it's a spot for latent yeast or wort to gather over time.
And your vinyl tubing is probably one of the cheapest things in your equipment.
Oh, for sure.
So,
and that's something that we deal with on the line cleaning side all the time when we run into aspects where people have carryover aromas and flavors if they switch a beer from one line to another, and a lot of times it comes through, where we get involved in a lot of aspects on cleaning those lines and trying to break down and eliminate odor and flavor carryovers. But a lot of time it's that and the gaskets are the biggest transgressors. Those are the ones that hang up and hold on to those flavors or those odors. And so if you're running into issues like that, sometimes it's as simple as replacing the vinyl and the rubber aspects of your brewing operation.
I want to get into what are probably myths about iodophor solution.
Sounds good. How long is this interview?
Well, just a few more minutes.
Yeah, no problem.
But I want to mention one that I've read that I think is probably a myth, and then I'll let you pick a couple of your favorites. But I read in one website that I don't use iodophor because I don't want to get too much iodine, and I'm afraid I'll get goiters. And it'll affect my thyroid, and I'll get goiters.
Okay, yeah, that's one of my personal favorites. Partially because iodine is required for a healthy thyroid. People don't realize how much iodine is in the products that they consume. iodized salt is full of iodine. There's a reason that they put iodine in salt, especially, particularly because, well, today not so much with fresh fish and fresh shellfish, so predominantly available in the market thanks to modern refrigeration and technological advances like that. But there were severe issues during portions of even American history where iodine was severely lacking in the diet. So iodine is something that your body does need in small amounts. And to tell you the truth, we've been manufacturing iodine for a long time, and we have never, ever had an issue. None of our employees have had issues, and we've had employees that have worked for us for the better part of 30 years and worked with the iodine compound in its most concentrated application as well.
And it is a chemical product, and you want to use it responsibly. And
oh, of course. I mean, are there toxic levels of iodine? For sure, particularly at the ingestion level. But we're looking on the level of ingesting liters of concentrated iodine to reach that toxic shock. The sort of stuff that's going to kill the stomach flora. The bacteria and the good bacteria that exist in your stomach to help you break down foods and digest your food and beverages. But for the most part, there's the direct skin contact with iodine carries no serious health effects, unless of course you're hypersensitive to iodine, which is something we touched on earlier. But if that's the case, that. And you can't eat things like iodized salt. There's certain fruits and vegetables you can't eat. There's shellfish and shrimp and products like that are strictly off your diet, which is interesting because most people who are allergic to shellfish have no problem with iodine. It's other aspects of the shellfish and the compounds in the shellfish that actually produce that allergic reaction.
So no goiters from
no
iodine.
Goiters from using iodine.
If that's one of your favorites, what's another favorite myth?
I guess one of my favorite ones are is you've really touched on a lot of them. My favorite one is the I need to immerse everything. I talk to so many people that are all concerned about how they just got a new 10-gallon carboy for brewing, and they're all perplexed on how they're going to find a 15-gallon tank to submerge this carboy in to sanitize it properly. And at that point, it's one of those situations that it comes back, and it's part of it is just assumptions that are misguided in the market, that you need to submerge everything in order to get it to that point, and the gross overuse of the product in the homebrew market, and it comes from just being properly educated on what needs to happen, and that's a difficult thing with a chemical product. A mechanical product you can take apart and look at it and see the gears and see the servos and understand how that all works. But on a chemical product, you're looking at a nameless brown liquid, and you're not quite sure what that does.
Yeah,
most people don't have the analytical chemical tools to tell them what that product is or what it's going to do.
Yeah, it's completely faith-based.
It really is. It really is, and that's where coming back and trying to be an educating force in the market is important, and especially particularly with the dawning of the internet, which is a great tool, particularly for homebrew. It's just a great way to throw around techniques, recipes, strategies, and really share them on an economical level. But it's also just the greatest transgressor when it comes to propagating myths and rumors about a product, because as soon as it's out there, there's no standard, there's no testing standard that to verify or not verify a claim.
Mm-hmm.
And usually those ones are the ones that run the fastest through the market.
Well, I'll give you one more myth.
Just about anything, huh? Well, I guess my major thing that I'd like to touch on, just that we didn't quite get on, is on the principles of cleaning and the 7 steps that exist to properly clean. This is even before the iodophor, before the sanitizing, before the rinse step. And there's 7 rules in there that you need to, that are the cornerstone of making sure you have a clean situation. And those are frequency, how often do you clean, concentration of your cleaning detergent, the contact time of that detergent to the soil load, physical methods, be that scrubbing, brushing, high-power spray to clean the surface, the temperature of the water, your soil load, and your water conditions. Now, when you figure that you can take soil load and water conditions pretty much out of the equation, because you can't really control those very much in a homebrew environment. Now you're looking at temperature, the physical methods, your contact time of the detergent, how much detergent you're using, and how often you clean. And how often you clean is really determined on how often you brew. So that can kind of get, that's kind of a given there. So really those 4 major aspects that people should keep in mind when they're prepping the surface of their cleaning material to get it ready for sanitizing is the concentration of the detergent they're using, and once again, more is not always better. The contact time for the detergent, and once again, more is not always better. The physical methods, if you can get in there and scrub, by all means, that will make things faster and more complete. And then temperature. So using warm or hot water is usually helpful, particularly when you're looking at detergents. But when you sanitize, follow the directions that are on the bottle about what kind of water conditions to use. So outside of that pretty much covers everything I think that I was looking to cover for you.
Well, I appreciate it. It sounds like the 7 steps could be the subject of another show.
It definitely could be. They're the principles of cleaning really haven't changed in the last 100-plus years. These are the same steps that people use in commercial environments for packaging food, all the way down to on-premise aspects to for the beer line cleaning. You figure out what you can control feasibly and what you can't, and try to find a balanced equation from there.
Well, Murl, I certainly appreciate your time. It's been it's been educational, and I think
I'm happy.
I think that I may have changed a couple of or will change a couple of the things that I do in my regime, and maybe relax and have a homebrew a little bit more after talking to you.
I think that sounds like a great option. So I hope that someone's taken something away from this that will hopefully save them time and hopefully keep them brewing more, or not get discouraged on if something has gone wrong in the past, to kind of get their sea legs back on and try it again.
Well, thanks again to Murl Landman for all the time and advice. I really enjoyed that interview. You can tell how big of a beer geek I am, because not everybody would be excited to talk about sanitization with somebody for the biggest part of an hour. And it doesn't stop there. Next week we'll talk to Charlie Talley of 5 Star Chemicals. Charlie's the inventor of Star San, but you'll be surprised to hear what he spent half the interview talking about. It's not Star San, it's something else. You'll be shocked and amazed, and you just have to tune in next week to find out. How's that for a teaser? If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com, and please don't forget to tell us where you're from. And while you're on our site, you can check out our online shop where you can get great pricing on our DVDs and a combo deal to save you even more. In our first DVD, Introduction to Extract Home Brewing, we walk you through the extract brewing process step by step from boiling to bottling, and in Basic Brewing stepping into all grain, we take you through the all-grain process from milling your grain to collecting your wort. We talk about batch sparging and fly sparging, and infusion mashing, step mashing. You can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com, and if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order it online from us, and we'll pack it up ourselves. By the way, on basicbrewing.com, Kelly has fixed the site where you can scroll through the archives a little better. They're organized by year now, so I appreciate Kelly's help on that. And thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We appreciate the support there. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are Advanced Email Marketing. Ugh, a little shudder there. And and Windows Vista, the missing manual. So hopefully, what I need is how to avoid advanced email marketing. No offense to the listener who bought that, but anyway. Thanks again, everybody. And remember, I can't tell who bought what out there, so no worries. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping, and we will get a slim percentage of your purchase. We appreciate your support. That's all until next week. Until then, thanks for listening. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by our buddy Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.